When the storm cleared, a story of hope. After the Kentucky tornado names have been changed for privacy reasons to protect the individuals involved in this story. Chapter 1. The warning. Sarah Mitchell had lived in London, Kentucky for 37 years, and she'd never seen anything like the weather alerts flooding her phone that Friday evening in May 2025. The National Weather Service was practically screaming through the notifications. Tornado emergency! Take cover immediately! Large and extremely dangerous tornado! Mom, we need to get to the basement, now. Her 22-year-old son, Jake, burst through the front door of their modest 2-story home on Sunshine Hills Road. He'd been working late at the auto shop downtown when the sirens started wailing. Sarah looked out the window at the eerie green-tinted sky. The air felt electric, heavy, wrong. Where's your sister? Emma's safe at her friend's house across town. But, Mom, seriously, we need to... The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, they could hear it. A sound like a freight train, growing louder by the second. Sarah grabbed her elderly neighbor, Mr. Peterson, who had been visiting for dinner, and the three of them stumbled down the narrow basement stairs just as the world above them began to scream. Chapter 2. The Aftermath. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was lying on the basement floor, covered in dust and debris. Her ears were ringing, and everything hurt. Beside her, Jake was stirring, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Mr. Peterson? Sarah called out. The elderly man was conscious but trapped under a fallen beam. His leg was clearly broken. I'm okay, dear, he said weakly. Just got a little banged up. Jake managed to free Mr. Peterson while Sarah tried to process what had happened. When they finally climbed out of the basement, they discovered there was no house left to climb into. Everything was gone. The tornado had swept away their home, their cars, their belongings, everything except the concrete foundation they were standing on. Where their neighborhood used to be, there was now a wasteland of twisted metal, splintered wood, and debris scattered across what had once been their quiet street. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, turning in a slow circle. The house where the Johnsons had lived for 15 years was completely gone. The Patel family's home, where little Ravi had just celebrated his 8th birthday, was reduced to a pile of rubble. Down the street, she could see parts of the Sunshine Hills Baptist Church scattered across the landscape like discarded toys. But the silence was the worst part. The complete, eerie silence where there should have been voices, crying, something. Were they the only ones who survived? Chapter 3. The First Voice. Hello? Anyone out there? The voice cut through the silence like a lifeline. Sarah, Jake, and Mr. Peterson followed the sound and found Marcus Johnson, their neighbor, standing in what used to be his driveway, covered in dust, but alive. Marcus! Thank God! Sarah called out. Have you seen Linda and the kids? They're okay. They're in the storm shelter, but... Marcus's voice broke. The Rodriguez family. Their house took a direct hit. I've been trying to dig them out, but I can't do it alone. Without hesitation, Jake ran toward the collapsed structure where the Rodriguez family had lived. Sarah helped Mr. Peterson to a safer spot and then followed her son. What they found was heartbreaking. The family's home had been completely destroyed, but they could hear muffled voices coming from beneath the debris. Maria Rodriguez and her 3 children were trapped in their basement, with water rising from a broken pipe. We need more help, Jake said, his voice tight with urgency. I can't move these beams by myself. As if in answer to his plea, more voices began calling out from across the neighborhood. One by one, survivors emerged from storm shelters, basements, and the wreckage of their homes. Within an hour, a group of 20 neighbors had gathered, all working together to free the Rodriguez family. Chapter 4. The Miracle Workers. By dawn, what had started as a desperate rescue effort had transformed into something remarkable. Word had spread beyond their neighborhood, and volunteers were arriving from all over Laurel County. A local contractor named David Chen showed up with his entire crew and heavy equipment. My own house got damaged too, he explained to Sarah as his workers carefully lifted debris. But these folks need help more than I need to worry about my own roof right now. David's story was extraordinary in itself. He had built his construction company from nothing after immigrating from Taiwan 15 years earlier. His own home, which he had constructed with his own hands as a symbol of achieving the American dream, had lost its entire second floor to the tornado. Yet here he was, prioritizing strangers over his own devastating loss. In Taiwan, we have a saying, David told Sarah as they watched his crew work. When the river rises, all boats rise together. This community gave me a chance when I was new here. Now it's my turn to give back. Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church downtown arrived with a truck full of water, sandwiches, and medical supplies. The church building is gone, he said simply. But the church is right here, right now. The pastor's own story was one of remarkable faith tested by tragedy. He had lost not only his church, but also his home, which had been next to the church property. His wife of 30 years, Margaret, had been in the hospital recovering from cancer surgery when the tornado hit. Williams had spent the entire night not knowing if she was safe, as phone lines were down, and the hospital had been partially damaged. When I finally got word that Margaret was okay, he told Sarah, I realized that everything else, the building, the furniture, even my library of sermon books, none of it mattered. What mattered was that we were all still here to help each other. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, who had lost her own clinic in the tornado, set up a makeshift medical station in the back of someone's pickup truck. She treated Mr. Peterson's broken leg, cleaned Jake's head wound, and tended to dozens of other injuries, all while her own home lay in ruins just 3 blocks away. Dr. Hayes had another devastating loss that she kept to herself during those first crucial hours. Her beloved golden retriever, Buddy, who had been her constant companion through medical school and her first years of practice, was missing. She had searched for him frantically before focusing on treating injured neighbors, but there had been no sign of him anywhere. I keep listening for his bark, she confided to Sarah during a brief break. 15 years we've been together. He used to sit in my office during patient appointments. The kids in town called him Doctor. Buddy. I can't imagine starting over without him. It was Jake who found Buddy 3 hours later, trapped but alive under the debris of Dr. Hayes' clinic. The dog was scared and had a minor injury to his leg. But when he saw Dr. Hayes, his tail wagged so hard his whole body shook. The reunion brought tears to everyone's eyes, a small miracle amid the devastation. By noon, they had successfully freed the Rodriguez family. Maria emerged from the basement carrying her youngest child, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Sarah. I thought we were going to die down there, she whispered. Thank you. Thank you all. The Rodriguez rescue had taken 5 hours and required the coordinated effort of 23 people. Maria's husband, Carlos, had been at work in the next county when the tornado hit. Unable to get through on the phones and finding roads blocked by debris, he had walked 12 miles through the night to get home, arriving just as his family was being pulled from the wreckage. I kept telling the children that help would come, Maria said later. I told them that our neighbors wouldn't forget about us. But honestly, I was starting to lose hope. When we heard voices above us, it was like hearing angels. Chapter 5. The Unexpected Gift. As the rescue efforts continued, Sarah noticed something she hadn't expected. People were finding things that didn't belong to them and going out of their way to return them. Jake found the Patel family's wedding album, somehow intact, half a mile from where their house used to stand. Mrs. Chen discovered Mr. Peterson's Purple Heart Medal, which he'd earned in Vietnam, embedded in a tree. "I thought I'd lost everything that mattered," Mr. Peterson said, clutching the medal with shaking hands. "But this is irreplaceable." The medal had a story that Mr. Peterson rarely shared. He had earned it in 1968 during the Tet Offensive, when he had risked his life to pull 3 wounded soldiers to safety under heavy fire. For 57 years, that medal had sat quietly on his mantel, a symbol of courage that he never talked about. Now, seeing it returned to him by neighbors who were showing the same kind of courage, he felt compelled to share its significance. "I was 19 when I earned this," he told the gathered volunteers. "Scared out of my mind, just like I was last night. But you know what I learned? Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you are afraid. Every person here today is showing that same courage." The kindness was infectious. When the Patel family found Sarah's grandmother's quilt wrapped around a stop sign, somehow barely damaged, they walked 2 miles to return it to her. "This is beautiful," Mrs. Patel said as she handed over the quilt. "It deserves to be treasured." Sarah had been holding back tears all day, but looking at the quilt her grandmother had made 60 years ago, and seeing the care with which her neighbors had preserved it, she finally broke down. "I keep thinking about everything we've lost," she sobbed. "Our house, our things, our life." The quilt represented more than just a family heirloom. Sarah's grandmother had made it during the Great Depression, using scraps of fabric from worn-out clothes and old curtains. Each square told a story. A piece of Sarah's mother's childhood dress, a section from her grandfather's work shirt, fabric from curtains that had hung in windows of a home that no longer existed. It was a testament to making something beautiful from whatever materials life provided. "But look around," Mrs. Patel said gently. "Look at what we found." As if to prove her point, more miraculous recoveries continued throughout the day. The Stevens family's cat, Whiskers, was found alive and unharmed inside what remained of a neighbor's garage, somehow having traveled 3 blocks from home. Little Emma Rodriguez's teddy bear, which she'd had since birth, was discovered in the branches of a tree, dirty but intact. Most surprisingly, the Johnson family's goldfish, Nemo, was found still swimming in his bowl, which had somehow landed upright in a field 200 yards from where their house had been. But perhaps the most touching discovery came when volunteers found a wooden box half buried under debris from the Methodist church. Inside were dozens of handwritten prayers that congregation members had submitted over the years. Prayers for healing, for guidance, for forgiveness, for strength. Pastor Williams wept as he read through them. "These prayers weren't destroyed," he said to his congregation that evening, as they gathered in the high school gymnasium for an impromptu service. "They were set free, and look around. Every one of these prayers is being answered right here, right now, in the way you're all caring for each other." Chapter 6. The Ripple Effect News of the Sunshine Hills. Community's response spread quickly. By the 3rd day, volunteers were arriving from neighboring states. A group of college students from Tennessee drove 6 hours to help with cleanup. A construction company from Missouri donated materials for temporary shelters. Church groups from as far away as Ohio showed up with food, water, and work gloves. Emma, Sarah's daughter, organized a social media campaign that raised $50,000 in 3 days. I may have lost my childhood home, she posted on Facebook, but I've gained faith in humanity. The story that touched the most hearts was about 8-year-old Ravi Patel. Despite losing his home and all his birthday presents, Ravi spent his days after the tornado helping elderly neighbors and carrying water to the volunteer workers. When a local news crew asked him why he wasn't upset about losing his toys, he said, "My toys were just things. These people are my friends. Friends are more important than things." The video of Ravi's interview went viral, bringing even more attention and aid to the London community. Chapter 7. The Builder. 3 weeks after the tornado, Sarah stood in the same spot where her house had been, but now she wasn't looking at devastation. Construction crews were everywhere, working on not just rebuilding homes, but making them better than before. David Chen, the contractor who had showed up that first morning, had coordinated with local officials and volunteer organizations to create a comprehensive rebuilding plan. "We're not just putting houses back," he explained to the gathered neighbors. "We're building a community that can withstand the next storm." The new homes were being constructed with storm shelters, reinforced foundations, and emergency communication systems. The neighborhood was being redesigned with wider streets for emergency vehicles and community gathering spaces. "It's going to be beautiful," Jake said, standing beside his mother. He had decided to stay in London and help with the reconstruction instead of going back to college in the fall. Better than it was before. Sarah nodded, but her mind was on something else. "You know what I've been thinking about," she said. "That night, when we were in the basement, I was so scared. I thought we were going to lose everything." "We did lose everything," Jake pointed out. "No," Sarah said, smiling. "We lost our stuff. We lost our building. But we didn't lose what mattered. We didn't lose our community. We didn't lose our capacity to care for each other. If anything, we found more of that than we ever knew we had." Chapter 8. The Gathering. 6 months later, the new Sunshine Hills neighborhood was nearly complete. The homes were beautiful, modern, and sturdy. The new community center was hosting its first major event, a celebration dinner for everyone who had been affected by the tornado and everyone who had helped with the recovery. Sarah looked around the room at faces she now knew like family. There was Dr. Hayes, who had reopened her clinic in a new building designed to serve as an emergency medical center during disasters. There was Pastor Williams, whose congregation had grown to twice its original size after people from all denominations came together during the recovery. There was David Chen, who had been named the county's emergency preparedness coordinator. Marcus Johnson stood up to speak. "6 months ago, we thought we had lost everything," he said. "Our homes, our security, our sense of safety. But what we discovered is that we had never really lost anything at all. We had just never fully appreciated what we had." He gestured around the room. "We had each other. We had our capacity for kindness. We had our ability to come together when things got tough. The tornado didn't take that away from us. It revealed it to us." Chapter 9. The Legacy. A year later, the Sunshine Hills model of disaster response and community rebuilding had been studied by emergency management professionals from across the country. Universities were sending students to study how the community had organized itself so quickly and effectively. But for Sarah, the real legacy wasn't in the academic papers or the news articles. It was in the way her neighbors still checked on each other every day. It was in the community garden they had planted where the old church used to be. It was in the fact that when the Martinez family's house caught fire 6 months after the tornado, 40 neighbors showed up within minutes to help, and the family was staying in 3 different homes within the hour. We learned something important, Sarah told a reporter who was writing a follow-up story. We learned that disasters don't just destroy things. They reveal things. They reveal who we really are when everything else is stripped away. And what we found out is that we're better than we thought we were. Chapter 10. The New Storm. 2 years after the tornado, severe weather warnings were issued again for Laurel County. This time, everyone was ready. The new early warning system kicked in, and every home in Sunshine Hills had a storm shelter. The community response team that had formed after the tornado activated immediately. Neighbors checked on neighbors, especially the elderly and families with small children. When the storms passed, causing only minor damage this time, Sarah stood outside her beautiful new home and marveled at how different everything felt. The weather had been just as severe, but instead of terror, she felt confidence. Instead of helplessness, she felt prepared. Instead of isolation, she felt surrounded by people who would always have her back. "You know what the best part is?" she said to Jake, who now lived in the house next door with his wife and new baby. "What's that?" "We're not just ready for the next storm," she said. "We're excited to help whoever else might need us." Epilogue. The lesson. The story of Sunshine Hills spread far beyond Kentucky. It became a model for disaster response, community building, and resilience. But perhaps more importantly, it became a reminder of something people often forget in the rush of daily life: that human beings are fundamentally good, that communities can be stronger than any storm, and that sometimes the worst things that happen to us reveal the best things about us. Sarah kept a journal throughout the recovery process. The last entry, written 3 years after the tornado, said simply, "We thought the storm was the end of our story, but it was really just the beginning." Today, visitors to London, Kentucky can see the Memorial Garden, where the old Sunshine Hills neighborhood used to be. But they can also see the new neighborhood, stronger and more beautiful than before. They can see the community center that serves as a model for disaster preparedness across the region. And they can see something else: a community that learned that the worst day of their lives could become the foundation for the best days they'd ever known. The tornado took their houses, but it gave them something more valuable: the knowledge that when everything falls apart, people come together. And when people come together, there's no storm they can't weather. This story is based on the real experiences of tornado survivors in Kentucky and other affected areas, but names and specific details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. The spirit of community resilience depicted here reflects the actual response of countless Americans who have faced natural disasters and chosen to rebuild not just their homes, but their hope.